stuck somewhere. I keep mentioning this thing. You know, this PhD journey is not like the normal primary or secondary system where all of us go to academic year. Say we are all in P1, so we all enter and we are doing the same time at the same time. Here we are entering and joining at different times, and so you'd find somebody today is struggling with data management. Another person is just beginning, struggling on crafting a topic. Another person is done with a proposal, is data collection. So we are at different points of our study, and this makes it even much interesting. That when someone has been able to go through a long way and has come up with a proposal, complete and submitted for review, and then another one is struggling with just crafting a topic, or trying to understand, even trying to identify which area to really place your study. So it's very interesting. So today I really feel that we, even if we are few, it's even much better that we listen to each other. You tell us how far, what are you doing, where are you, is there any way we can support each other? And I would be very glad that we spend this 1 hour listening to each other, and that would really to help us to know, help us to see how best we can be helpful to each other. So today I just feel like just opening this up and ask people, what are you doing? Where are you? How far? Is there any challenge? If there is no challenge, how are you making it? Because some of us are stuck somewhere. How are you? What are you doing? How are you? How can you help us? And so that's the kind of conversation I really feel we should have this morning. So I just want to open this up and just ask you, just feel free, speak to us, tell us what you're doing, where you are, how far. Is there anything you can tell us this morning that can help some of us also to move? Because really, it's okay for me to play videos, that's fine, but in most cases, these videos might not speak directly to your challenge or to your problem or to your success. So maybe if we listened from you, if you tell us, this is what I'm doing, this is how far, this is how I've been progressing, or this is how things have been hard for me. We have professors here that can be able to help us and encourage us, and we move on. So I want to open this floor for discussion this morning. Kindly unmute and share with us what is happening in your space. So I'm scrolling through my chat. I would like to really see somebody unmute and they speak with us. I would be very happy to listen to you. Okay. You may have to permit me to call your name, and you tell us what you're doing. And since people are fearing to go fast, I want now to begin to call out people, and so that we can be able to hear from you. So let me start with my sister here, Dina. Dina, what is happening? What are you doing? Where are you? How far?
I knew when you said let me call out, somehow
Yes.
my gut telling me, oh, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, yeah, good morning, Professor and everyone else. Really Thank you.
We are losing you, I think.
Very much for this platform. Been for me that has taken me to. I have a topic. My topic is based monitoring. I think because I'm traveling, I was you can get me. Hello?
Okay, Dina, we will get back to you when you have
Hello?
reached. Hello, we seem not to get.
Joseph.
Yes.
Hello?
Dina is traveling. We don't
Yeah.
seem to be getting her well.
Mm.
We'll give her a bit of
I think
time.
I'll
Probably.
arrive in the next 15.
Yes, we will. Dina, certainly we will get back to you. We've noticed that your network's not stable because you are moving, but we'll certainly get back to you. But thank you very much for being part of us and willing to share with the rest of the participants this morning your progress and what you're doing. Thank you very much. We'll get back to you when you're settled. But you can also let us know when you're settled, then we'll move on. I have my friend Thomas. Thomas is from Busitema University, I think, yeah. So Thomas, is there anything you can share with us this morning as far as your work is concerned? How far, what is happening in your space? Is there anything you're learning in this platform? At least you're one of the people that usually doesn't miss, and I'm really very excited every time I log in the morning and I see names that are very familiar. I really get excited. So Thomas Mayende, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Lasu. I appreciate your concerns. Well, I would say that I've learned quite a lot, and in the few coming days, I think I'll be sharing with the whole congregation what I've gained and what I intend to do in the near future. I should be able to do that. So I think that's what I can say. Yeah. Because when I reach the sharing phase, it will really be open to the whole congregation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas. And I think it's a sign that we are moving and we are learning. By the time people begin to promise that in the near future I'll be sharing ABCD, for me that gives me courage and some strength to move on. Thank you very much. Let me scroll down and see. I really want people to volunteer and speak to us. I have another very good friend of mine here, still Thomas Wabwire. This is still from Bustem, I guess. Thomas, what is happening? How far? What is going on? Are we progressing well? Are we stuck anywhere? What are we doing? Okay. Thomas seems to be not, I don't know whether it's a network challenge, but It's okay, we'll get back to you, Thomas, later. Okay, let's move on. Samuel Makondo, you usually don't miss. Thank you very much for your commitment, especially in the students session. Thank you very much. Can you share with us what's happening? How far? Where are you?
Thank you very much for offering me this opportunity to share with what I have. I usually attend this session. At the moment, I'm still crafting my topic.
Okay.
Not yet gone far.
That's very good.
Thank you.
And Thomas, feel free to get in touch with any of the colleagues here. There are people here who have gone through that part of the study, crafting the topic. There are people here who are done with their proposals. There are people here who are about to present their findings. So feel free to get in touch with any of them, and certainly, of course, you need to have something before you go to your supervisors. It's unlikely that supervisors here will give you a topic. Of course, they can, but it's unlikely in most cases. So feel free, get in touch with many of these people in this platform. Discuss the ideas you have with them. But above all, it's very important that you first begin by looking at the area where you want to undertake your study. Do a lot of reading around that area so that you'll be able to identify some of the issues, the gaps, and so on. Then you now begin to craft a topic. That will be very good for you. But feel free. There are many people here who can be of help at that level where you are. But thank you very much. I noticed that you usually participate in this morning session and you don't miss. So thank you very much. And I want to wish you real well in your journey. Thank you. Let me move to, I have another brother of mine from Busitema. I don't know why I'm in Busitema today. Mr. Mario Ouma. Is there anything you'd like to share with us this morning? How far? What are you doing? How are you progressing? Is everything okay? Or you're stuck somewhere? You need some form of help? So the floor is yours, Mario.
Thank you very much. Good morning, team.
Good morning.
Personally, I have been on and off, especially for the last 2.5 months. Certain changes in my life, health-wise, but I'm now back.
Sorry.
I had only drafted some ideas to share with my supervisor, which I thought could be something to guide us in our discussion. Then
Yes.
I got some health challenges and I've been off for quite a while. But now I'm back, and I think beginning probably next month, I'll be very ambitiously pursuing my supervisors and colleagues to guide me so that I can move further. I want to believe that by December, I will be at the stage where I can share a draft with you for guidance. Thank you.
Wow, that's very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mario. We wish you the very best in your journey, in your struggle. But also we pray for you that you recover from ill health. You know, this PhD journey is very hectic, so rigorous. You need to be at your best. But nevertheless, we wish you the very best, and we hope it will be well with you. I want to make this request. In the morning session here, I know there are people here who are already doctors, and there's professors here. So kindly log in with your title in case you are a doctor, in case you are a professor, so that we really address you that title, because we don't want to start calling you Mr. Or Madam. So kindly do that so that we don't just start calling you anyhow. Okay, thank you very much. Who is next? Who is willing to share with us what is happening in your space? Meanwhile, as we are waiting for you to make up your mind to speak, I know Sister Peace is always ready and is always sharing with us. So let's maybe give this chance to Sister Peace, to Shabi, to share with us how did you manage to go that far? Some of us are here stuck. We need to get some tips from you. So Sister Peace to Shabi can share with us as we wait for other people to make up their minds.
It's a journey that is on and off, on and off. Some meeting, I've been doing some supervisors. So I'm submitting, I've been having a challenge with the problem statement. I mean, sorry, on the background that it's not coming up properly. Go back, come back. Whatever my issues were somehow for my thoughts, not for literature. So, but I'm still submitting. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Peace. Only that the network seems to have disturbed us. We seem not to have got much of what you are saying, but nevertheless, at least some of us have been in touch with you, and we know how far you have gone. Only that other people who could have benefited from that information seem to have missed because of the network challenge. Okay, let's go to Dennis. Dennis, speak to us.
Thank you, Joseph. Good morning, colleagues on the Socrates platform.
Good morning, Dennis.
I'm working with Prof. Ntai, who introduced me on this platform recently. I joined you on the topic of the relevance of the PhD. My topic is sustainable irrigation practices among smallholder farmers. And I've identified so far the theories I'm working with, which is the action theory of Mike Fries, the social network theory, and the complexity theory. So I'm proceeding with the review of the theories, and with the help from this platform, when Dr. Nkuruziza shared on the philosophy, the ontology, and epistemology, I'm proceeding with crafting it better. And so I'll be sharing soon on this platform my proposal after discussing with my supervisor, Professor Ntai. But I thank him so much for this platform, and I've learned so much from colleagues. Thank you, Joseph, for giving me this opportunity and I've loved to hear from people who share on this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you for being part of us. You're very, very welcome, and feel free to contact any of us when that time comes, when you're ready to make a presentation to the rest of the, I want to call this a class, to the rest of the class. I'll be very happy to hear from you when you're presenting your work. Thank you very much. I saw a hand from Galaxy. Galaxy, before we go to Godfrey, Galaxy, I saw a hand from Galaxy. Kindly unmute and share with us.
Chair.
Yes.
Masiko is my name. Busitema University.
Oh, Busitema. I think I need to
Yes.
visit Busitema. Busitema is very serious. You people are very serious, and I think one of these days I should really change my university. Come that side.
Yes, we are very serious. We are called one, and we are trying to follow up the morning calls, and we are very much interested.
Thank you.
For me, I'm trying to. I'm going on chapter 2 of my topic. Staff presentism in public universities. That is my topic. And for me, I have benefited quite a lot, Chair, because at one time morning call, we had this topic which was saying under what circumstances can the researcher write a narrow hypothesis. It interested me very much because one the thing that came out clear was that when writing this hypothesis, you must ask questions. What are you trying to explore? And what do you want to bring out? You must align with objectives, and then the narrow hypothesis. So I came to see that some of these issues that we emphasize in the statement of the problem and all these are very, very critical. And Chair, also there was this conceptual framework, the theories which we studied, the one of the morning calls, where it was actually bringing out the theory building, the conceptual framework, and all this. So it really made us to understand quite a lot. And as some of us who are writing the background, we are still on the ordering the constructs and variables. These things are really assisting us, Chair, and this morning code is very, very important. We don't want to miss it as we say, my people, because we are pioneers and we are very much interested. So I actually came to look to know this conceptual framework, the linear relationships, the moderated model, the moderated moderation mediation model. So all these ones are really bringing us into a good perspective, and Chair, we are very happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of these days, I really need to come to Busitema because you people give me a lot of energy. You're very serious. Thank you very much. So let me quickly move to my brother Godfrey, and then later I'll come to Kepta Umbati. So Godfrey, speak with us. Yes, Godfrey, your hand is up, and we are ready, and right now we are listening. Can you speak? Okay, maybe Godfrey is having some challenge, but let me give this chance to my brother Kepta as we wait for Godfrey to sort out. I think should be having network challenges. So Kepta Umbati, the floor is yours. Tell us how far, what's happening, what are you doing, how are you progressing, how can you help us who are stuck? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and good morning to you and good morning to the class. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for the dedication that you've demonstrated throughout in guiding this platform. And I'd like also to thank the distinguished scholars, the doctors and professors who have selflessly offered themselves to help the students on this platform to make progress. We deeply appreciate. My name is Captain Bati, and I'm from Kenya. I'm at the University of Nairobi Business School. And early this year, I presented my topic to the business school panel, and it was approved. My topic is on competitive strategies and competitive advantage of graduate business schools. But I've been stuck for two main reasons. Number one is on literature. I've had challenges getting relevant literature with regard to graduate business schools locally. That means within Kenya and across Africa. There's a quite substantial output from other places, US, Europe, and part of Asia. But Africa, there's a dearth of literature. And I've also had the challenges in getting literature around the mind study variables. That's a competitive strategy and a competitive advantage. There is literature on each of those variables individually, researched along with other variables. But the latest literature I have linking the two variables is from 2014. So that's, you can see that's older literature. So that's where I'm stuck. The second part of it is operationalization of competitive advantage in a way that is different from competitive strategy. Because in competitive strategies, if you look at, for instance, Porter's generic strategies, cost leadership, differentiation, focus. When I go to literature that deals with the competitive advantage, I get measures such as cost advantage, differentiation advantage, and so on. So in terms of distinguishing them, it's a challenge. As researchers who've you've studied the competitive advantage, unfortunately, many of them have tended to use the measures of performance. But the literature shows that, in fact, there's a problem there, because competitive advantage and performance are two different constructs. So that's where I'm stuck. Yes. And I would really appreciate any help from the distinguished scholars and from other students, maybe who have an interest in this area, because I've really been very stuck, and it's very frustrating at the moment.
Wow.
Thanks, Joseph. Back to you.
My brother from Nairobi University, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. I want to encourage you that this journey sometimes is like that. Some moments you feel you have nowhere to turn to, and things are really not moving in the right direction. But the good news is that we have known professors here in this platform. And surely, I am sure before we end the student session, we will have somebody who is interested in the same area, and we might have a professor saying a word or two on some of the challenges, including the one that you're going through. On that note, I also want now to take this opportunity to appreciate the professors and the doctors who are here, the student session. I want to really start by appreciating the work done by our very own Professor Joseph Ntai, the brain behind this platform. Thank you very much, Professor. I don't know how you do it and how you manage to wake up all of us at 3 and gather us together in this virtual class. Whatever you do, I don't know, but what I know is we are very happy and the students appreciate the work you're doing. And we pray and believe that you'll be in good health, strong, and live long to be able to guide and help students who are in this journey. I want also to thank very much Professor Michael Kochi. Thank you very much, Prof. You have always been there. And I must report that a number of students, I think 3 or 4, have been asking me to give them your contact, and I was hesitant. And I think with your permission, I might give the students your contacts because they feel you have what they need. And I think one of these days, with your permission, I should be able to give them your contact so that they can hear from you. And as I'm even still, if I could even finish, those who are interested, the professor's number is right there. He has already shared it. So I thank you very much. There is another professor that I right now is in London. Professor, I don't know whether that name is Picho or Pico, but Prof, I wouldn't want to mention that because I do not know how to read it properly. So I've seen your hand up, but I want to reserve your comments so that you be making some, you make your communication towards the end. Kindly allow me to not welcome you now. Let me first deal with my colleagues here. They have issues that they want you, the professors, to hear and help them. Another person I want to really appreciate this morning is Professor James Kagari. Professor James, I have never met you physically. I don't know how you look like, but one thing I've met is the knowledge that you have and the commitment to help us. Thank you very much. You know, it humbles me to see professors at this time. It would even make more sense to the listeners if the professors came at 4 when we are sharing our fast rubbish. I call it fast rubbish. But if you are willing to wake up at 3 and listen to very raw information that we are sharing, then we are humbled. Thank you very much. And many other doctors and professors that have logged in, and maybe you've not identified yourself with that title. So it's very difficult now for me to know whether you are a professor, a doctor, or you are a student like me. But thank you very much. I want now to get back to my brother Godfrey Lubega. I don't know whether you are okay now. You had put up your hand and were trying to listen to you, but I think your network would not allow. Can you confirm to me that you can speak to us? Okay. I think he's even off now. I don't see him. Okay. Allow me also appreciate Dr. Nkurusisa, who has joined and is part of the core people in this entire class. Doctor, you're very welcome. We appreciate your input and we appreciate your commitment in this whole journey, helping us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Students, by the way, have nothing to offer for to appreciate you. We only give you words. We only say thank you and wish that God will bless you and meet you at your very point of need. But we have nothing tangible that we can say we are offering to you. So that is the status. That's how things are. But we know that we are very grateful and we are very happy that you are there offering help to us. I want now to get back to our sister Dina. Dina, you were traveling and you had indicated that in the next 20. By then you said 20 minutes you'll be settled. Can we now hear from you if at all you're settled? If not, we can still hear from other people.
Yeah, Joseph, thank you. I've arrived safe and settled.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning again. And thank you very much to our mentors. I can't be able to thank you enough. I just keep praying for everyone in this forum every day for long life. That's the best I can do to say thank you. In terms of progress, I have made some baby steps progress. I have a topic, an approved topic, which is results-based monitoring evaluation, RBME, and performance of government programs. Looking at a case of the UWEP program in Soroti district. UWEP is Uganda Women Enterprise Program. Yes, I have moved, worked on my chapter 1, doing a literature review. But I think my major hiccup right now is on the historical and philosophical aspects of the study variables. My guidelines, okay, I should have said I'm Dina. I am doing my PhD at Nkumba University. So the guidelines for chapter 3 actually on the historical and philosophical aspects say you're doing it on the dependent variable. My dependent variable here is performance of government programs. So I've searched literature and okay, that is where I'm still really stuck with delivering this chapter 3. What are the historical aspects? Who are the philosophers who advanced their performance? So I'm still really around that is where I'm stuck. On the methodology chapter, I have conceptualized it. I think I'm going to do a mixed methods approach, more of quantitative and then a mix with a qualitative, but I'm still on conceptualization stage around that and really doing a lot of reading to be able to get the first principles to the study. I am very hopeful that in the next 2 weeks is my target. I want to present in the morning call so that I get more elaborate feedback on my work. I know it will propel me further. I think for now that is what I can mention in terms of progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dina. When somebody tells you that I'm at a point where in the next few weeks I should be able to make a presentation here, you must really appreciate that substantial effort has been put in, and we remain praying for you. We will continue working together, especially in areas where we are able. Where we are not, again, I want to say that we have professors here who have dedicated themselves and offering service which is not paid. And we believe that they are at any moment, one day they will be able to, help you when you make a presentation. They will give you more comments that will make you move forward. We still have about 16 minutes in our morning call. And before, I want really to give some time to professors to say one or two words to encourage us. But I thought before I do that, I want to give chance to one or two more students to share with us what is happening with you, what is the challenge, or what is the progress. And especially for those who are about to make presentation of your results, can you encourage us who are stuck? Can you share with us some, share with us some ideas that will be able to follow, that we can also make that progress that you have made? As you even had in the beginning of this class this morning, some people were saying, I'm crafting a topic. Others are saying, I'm struggling with my chapter 3. And for you're preparing to present your results, and you cannot even share with us. Please be kind to us. Share with us some tricks that you've used to move very fast and reach where you've reached. Would be very glad to. Somebody might acknowledge you in that part of the thesis where they do acknowledgement. But of course, that's on the light side. But kindly share with us, how were you able to move? What did you do? What is that we are not doing and you did, and you're able to move quickly? I just want one or two students before I give this to the professors to give us some one or two words of encouragement. I would be very glad if you just put up your hand or unmute and speak, because I might call your name when you're sleeping, and then we'll keep calling and calling when actually you're not available. So kindly unmute or raise the hand. I'll be able to see. I'm just looking through my chat here, and then we'll be able to listen to you. Okay. If we, I'm not seeing a hand. Can assume that the rest of the people who have not said anything, the students, can assume that you have nothing or you have finished. Okay, Godfrey, you're back. I can see you're back. We're looking for you. You put up your hand and we could not hear you. So I don't know whether you'll be able to speak now. If you can, kindly go ahead and speak with us. I think Godfrey is having network issues, and it's not able, I think. Okay, Mohammed, thank you. Go on and speak to us.
Okay, good morning, professors, doctors, and the colleagues on this morning call. My name is Mohammed, and I'm from Bustema. So my topic, my area of study is the university entrepreneurship ecosystems in Uganda. I've so far met my supervisors, and they told me to, actually first, I didn't go with the, I just had something at the background, then I went with that, and they told me what to look at. I was told to look at the different theories, from the different journal articles that have already been discussed about the entrepreneurship ecosystems and published. So I went back, then I was told to look at the different theories that have been advanced. And that's when the lead doctor told my supervisor, told me to begin looking at interesting theories that he shared with me and told me I should go and read about them, then come back. But also told me I should go and look at, because I'm dealing with a university, so I should look at, he sent me to one of the MOOCs, actually, which has an entrepreneurship ecosystem sort of in terms of the incubation center. I told him I should go and look for cases of youth that, of young people that have been have gone through and have succeeded, and try to talk to them, and also try to talk to the managers and find out how far these youth have moved. Then I come back, but as well, when before I go, because it also it takes some time, but as well, I try to go back, and then it tells me to look at how I should go with theory. So that's how far I am, but I want to really thank the doctors and professors and the different knowledge that has been shared, because it has been able to help me to move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. And indeed, you follow that advice, and you'll be able to move. You know, once you are given an assignment to do it very well, and you'll be able to move. So we are grateful that you are moving and things are happening, and we pray for you and wish you well in your journey. And we are many here who are still fidgeting and struggling, and sometimes you think you've reached the dead end, you're in between two hard surfaces, but there is a space to break through somewhere. So let's keep working and struggling, and following the advice we are given, and one day we will overcome. Thank you very much. Right now, we are almost coming to an end of this, to the end of the student session, and I want now to give this opportunity to Professor. Professor has all his names are really very difficult for me. Professor, just have mercy on me. Professor Pico or Picho, kindly come and encourage the students. Come and say some few words that can help the students move. Otherwise, you've been listening to the challenges students are having, and I'm sure when they hear your voice, they will feel a bit of relief and will be able to get strength and move on again. So kindly share with us some encouragement, and we'll be able to move. So thank you very much, Prof. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for inviting me. I begin by again thanking my senior colleagues on this platform, and all of you, our dear candidates who are on your PhD journey. It is a pleasure always to meet early morning like this and have a cross-pollination of ideas which may help you when you pick one or two of them in undertaking your PhD journey. As I said earlier on to a few people, there's a huge time difference between us, some of us outside the East African countries, and those of you who are there in East Africa itself. Right now in London, we are the time is adjusted and we are 3 hours behind. So if you look at your time in Uganda, you can see at what time it is for me this side. While some of you will be getting up to go for prayers in the morning, I will be resuming my business in my bed to sleep before I can go for my prayers. I was quite enthused, especially by our colleague, Kepta Ombati from Nairobi University, who is undertaking his studies on competitive strategy and competitive advantages. Again, when I relate this to quite a few topics that have been shared here, and then I feel that there are a few things which needs to be got right at the beginning. In my understanding, you are all PhD students, not at the same level as Joseph said earlier on. You're at different points in time. Some are yet getting to, get their topic. Others are in chapter 1 trying to do conceptualization, and some who have shared have indicated that in chapter 2 and others even chapter 3 as they try to determine now what research paradigms they are going to use, what research approaches they are going to use to undertake their studies. But I think one of the things which I would like to bring out in a generic sense is exactly how to come up with a topic, because that is very important insofar as your research project is concerned. First of all, there's what we call opportunistic research. By the time you are doing your PhD, it's assumed that you have had already your master's, and then you want to go into depth in what you have done at your master's level, so that you are deeper in the understanding of the area in which you are a specialist, and trying to move from being a semi-specialist to a full specialist in that particular area. And that makes it become an opportunistic research, because you are deepening an area which you are already familiar on, since you have done it at master's level prior to this undertaking of a PhD in the same area. Now, what I find that probably could be a little bit of a challenge is in exactly coming up with the topic which one studies. Now, it is important to note that as you come up with a topic, first and foremost, you determine the area you are interested in, the area of studies. And the area of studies surely should be an area which you are comfortable with, because you are choosing your topic from so many areas, and eventually you have zeroed down in an area, and that zeroing down onto that area should have been due to your familiarity with it, which probably is occasioned by the fact that having identified that amongst others, you have an area you are interested in, then you will have read very widely in that area, and that would have put you in a good position to make a choice that that's the area in which you're interested, and you have identified that it is a problematic, there's a problem in the area, which eventually narrows down to the topic you're coming up with. Now, having identified the area and having read very widely and deeply in that area, that should have put you in a position to be able to identify and come up with what is now specifically your topic of interest. And furthermore, now as you come up with the topic of your study, we expect that you should have determined the study variables, and having determined the study variables, should have again further done some good literature review so as to understand the variables of your study. Because without a good grasp, a good understanding of your study variables, then it becomes a challenge to do your conceptualization right, because it is from the study variables, main variables, that you should be able to come up with the constructs, or what also in other words they call the elements of the variables, which will help you come up with the objectives of the studies. And so literature review should not be looked at only in terms of chapter 2, because it is very important that right away the review of related literature in the study areas in the generic sense, and specifically in terms of your study variables, should have informed you that you would be able either to get adequate literature, or there's a dearth of literature in the area, which happened to be the case of our colleague, that is the Kepta Ombati from Nairobi University. It is imperative that you do very good study on your study variables and really understand them, because first and foremost, even in the background, if especially you follow the 4-perspective approach, you should have given us a good understanding of the concepts, the main concepts of your study. And so there's no study which actually one would undertake without really reading around the area of interest one has chosen. And it is that which can also help you be able to determine whether it is a topic which is researchable or not researchable, or if researchable, how feasible it is. Is it? These are all important questions to ask yourself right when you are selecting a topic that you are going to undertake. And that's what would already lead you to make a choice whether or not you are doing that particular topic, or you are getting some other variables because of availability of literature, because of variables which have very clear constructs or elements which helps you in formulating your objectives, and eventually the research questions which fits into the hypothesis of the studies, especially if you are going quantitative, or you're using a mixed method, which also involves both quantitative and qualitative. And so there are not too many ways about it, but to identify the area right and read widely in the area of your interest, and that is what can help you come up with your research topic. Which is a research topic? You have to do a lot of studies on the variables of the studies, and go deeper into the sub-variables, the constructs, which I'm saying, and all the elements, but also not to stop there, because you may find that you have got the constructs of a variable, but how are you going to collect your data without having determined the indicators of that construct, of those constructs beforehand? And so these don't come by chance, and not just by sitting and thinking about them, but reading very, very widely. And if you try to get a number of journals on such a similar studies undertaken, they should be able to help you in conceptualizing and coming up with your constructs and the indicators of each and every construct of the study. And I think that should be the case with our colleague Kepta Ombate, who needs to dive into studying deeply around competitive advantage, which he finds is a challenge that supposedly is his DV of the studies. I think this is what I would say. And it's important that really before you go deeper into your studies, first you do proper conceptualization, because it is proper conceptualization which gives you the direction you are taking and how you are to proceed with the studies that you are interested in undertaking. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Prof. My colleagues, I'm sure you have heard from people, seasoned scholars. Prof there, I think, is working on his second or third PhD, something of the, I think around there. So when he speaks, you really have to listen attentively. Thank you very much, Prof. I know we've come to the end of this session, and I want to really thank you very much, everybody who has participated. Thank you so much. I thought this is very important that we just come out and talk about what we are doing. You know, you can hide with your things there, and then they will surprise you on the day you're making your presentation to the doctor committee or the graduate school. They will surprise you from there. And when they tell you that your things are not connected, you don't know what you're saying. It will be more painful. You'd rather come out right now and let your work be critiqued, and so that you, by the time you go to make your presentation, you're making sense out of what you're doing. Otherwise, don't wait to be shocked in the end. It's better you get the shock of your life now, reorganize yourself and go back and present and proceed. So it's very important. So thank you very much, Prof, and all the professors who have been part of us. Thank you very much. And all the doctors, thank you very much. My fellow students, thank you. Thank you for participating this morning. Thank you for joining, and I wish you the very best in the next session. And at this very moment, allow me take this mic to Professor Ahmad Okoche, who will be leading us in the next session. Professor, my work has come to an end at this point. I would now want to hand over to you. Thank you very much, Prof.
Okay, thank you so much, Joseph, for the good work. And also I want to thank everyone who has participated in the first session. I must say that there's a lot of learning taking place during the first sessions, and we're going to continue in the next session. Allow me to appreciate most of the student leaders who have really driven the early morning sessions. And if I call back the time when I just joined this platform, it would be a difficult hassle to even get students to participate and even get really the process of management. But I think really now we have come in a time where the student leaders and the students are really participating actively. I want to acknowledge Elas himself, Sylvia Arakit, must appreciate you, Wabukala Bernard, Charles Oluport, and then Thomas Mayende. I've listened sometimes some of the insights, and I really appreciate, and we learn a lot. I think, honestly, I want, before we start this session, to appreciate our mentors and the senior colleagues in the platform. Of course, I must start by appreciating Professor Joseph Ntai. He's really our mentor. He's a mentor of all of us. For me personally, I know he's my mentor. I've followed him most of the time. I've listened to his YouTube messages. I've read most of his articles, and that's how we grow in scholarship. And I want to encourage most of us who are in the platform, whether senior or still students, we can get in your free time some of the messages in the YouTube, read some of the articles. Professor Antai has really published a lot, and his articles are very good. I think even some of the issues, sometimes people say there's no literature. Literature is there, by the way. It's there. I also want to appreciate Professor Pincho. Professor, thank you so much. Despite being in another country, but you are still in touch. That's how addictive this platform is. I also want to appreciate Professor James, Dr. Gideon Kuzinza, our presenter of the day. Most appreciate you. Dr. Ahmad Wangembe, and then Dr. Hassan Bashir. This is something small. I think the first time we logged in the platform, and what normally makes the platform interesting is the debates, the arguments, the ideas, the insights which different people give. And I think Professor Gideon, Dr. Gideon, really, I remember the first time I used to log in, I used to like most of his contributions, and then I'd seen Dr. Musenze, I don't know whether he's still on, and sometimes no network disturbed, but at some point I saw him. He's one of really senior colleagues who are really inspired. So I think this morning we shall be continuing with our presenter. I don't know whether I could have missed some senior colleagues, but I think I will acknowledge all of them because I see at the time when I was starting, most of them were logging in. Yes, Dr. Goretti, Kione is now there. You're welcome. Then Dr. Ahmad Wangembe has been very instrumental in making sure that things happen, really. Coordination between the students, and we, Dr. Ahmad, we appreciate you, and sometimes even moderating. And really, it's not easy. Somebody who is already busy to give in his or her time to make sure that this platform keeps on going. And really, some of us who have benefited enormously from the platform, we really appreciate all the effort, all the senior colleagues logging in the morning. Thank you so much, all the students from different countries. You're welcome. And I know at the end, we shall be able to acknowledge everybody. But Dr. Gideon, I think we want to invite you to continue with the presentation, and this time you will be dealing with analyzing mediation. So, and I think for the people who have attended the previous sessions, who have really got very, very critical insights. And maybe before, actually, yeah, I think we're privileged because at the time when I was a student, I used to look for money to pay for air tickets to go and attend this kind of sessions. It is not easy, but now you just in the sitting room or wherever you are, you just log in at 3 o'clock, and there you are getting very valuable knowledge. And they don't take it lightly. I heard somebody was asking about how we can be able to improve. I think just logging in every morning, you learn a lot of things. So Dr. Gideon, I don't want to take much of your time, but I think I want to welcome you to share your screen and again continue with the presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Michael. Oh, Professor. I'm sorry.
No, I'm a doctor.
Yeah, all the senior colleagues and the PhD students plus any other potential person for the PhD journey. I'm happy again to share with you some few insights in this area of methodology and analysis. Previously, we looked at recursive and non-recursive models, and from that discussion, we discovered that when you have non-recursive models, there's one of the key biases that you must always pay attention to. And if I'm to make a recap, I mentioned about endogeneity bias. For today, I know we are ready to look at the theory behind mediation testing. Thereafter, understanding the theory, perhaps we shall have to look at then the practical analysis. But before we go ahead to look at the mediation, for those who are not there, allow me to maybe re-emphasize the endogeneity bias, because as you go through the mediation modeling, you need to appreciate this key bias that always affect the consistency or the stability of their model, which you finally use for making a conclusion, deriving evidence-based policy based on that final model. So I think it is important to look at what we said previously. I'm not spend more time here since most of us were there. What do we say for endogeneity bias? Whereas we look at other biases, non-response bias, common method bias, to mention but few, I'm aware that there is a serious debate on this issue, and at times we tend to dodge it, yet it is very critical. One, it's important to know how do you know that you have endogeneity issue. At times you now need to look at the predictor variables, which are your independent variables and your dependent variable. Now, once you find that there is a correlation, there is a significant actual correlation between the error term of the dependent variable and the independent variable. It could be one, it could be more than one of the independent variables which you have. Now, once you find that there is that significant correlation between either one of the predictor variables or more than one of them with the error term or the residual value which you have for the dependent variable or for the response variable, then you know there is a suspicion that something is happening. And what is happening is that there is endogeneity. You start becoming suspicious, and that gives you an insight to look at that. Now, the other situation is that at times you find when you correlate maybe one of the key predictors that you have when you are theorizing and conceptualizing, you found that from previous scholars, one of the predictors seem to be very important in explaining your dependent variable. But you find that somewhere, somehow, as you continue reading, you find that again that predictor variable is explained by another variable, which could be even the control variables. Now, that's when you now realize that perhaps you could have excluded very important predictor in the model. And in that perspective, once you predict that, oh, you anticipate, given the wider review of literature, and you find that there is that key predictor that you have ignored, you know, again, there is that inconsistency of the model. So your model may not actually be the best model. And in most cases, whenever you're presenting your work, you know there are those scholars who understand exactly what you're saying and perhaps have read further. So they keep on asking, you have left all this, why? When we know it is very, very important. I'm aware that on this platform we have different people from different fields, so we have different lenses in understanding these things. If I go to economics, there is what we call priori theory behind what you're studying. So once you mention something, and we know from economics, there's where we understand that this thing must have one of the key predictors, and you ignore that. Ideally, they keep on asking where you're coming from. You seem to have ignored a very important predictor. And that can result into a problem in your model. And when your model is having an issue, then that becomes a problem. So that's another suspicion of endogeneity bias. The other situation is where you have the simultaneity. In other words, you have the two-way causality. In most cases, you find that when you are theorizing and conceptualizing through the theoretical review and empirical review, you could have found that maybe X predicts Y. Well, I'm using one of the predictors, but you could have more than one predictors. But you find that in your model, maybe one or two predictors tend to cause Y, which Y is your dependent variable. And again, Y again, when you go to results, you find that actually when you try to interrogate the data, you find again Y leads to X1. In other words, you find that your dependent variable again causes the independent variable. And when such a situation happens, then you know there is some presence of endogeneity. You have to be suspicious, and then you go and test. In research, it's not good to be comfortable because there are those findings that perhaps may become new to future researchers to really understand, or policymakers. So ideally, that's another situation where we tend to be suspicious. Now, what do we say? In summary, I have also added another situation of measurement errors that we need to pay attention, especially when you reach the operationalization and measurement of variables. It is important to know how we are measuring the study variables. And this reminds us, of course, we need to understand the measurement scales clearly. We need to understand how we are anchoring these measurement items in the questionnaire for those who collect primary data. That's very important. The other one I mentioned about it, I said these are, I think I've mentioned about these ones, the major probable causes of endogeneity is what I've been explaining, and this summarized here. What are likely remedy? I know there's a scope where I don't need to go to, especially I know majority of us maybe from social science. I don't want to go to pure science. There are other ways of handling these endogeneity bias, but let me particularly concentrate on the approaches from social science. One is that we aim at eliminating measurement errors, and I think this one I've mentioned about it. One, you need to know you need strength, the theorization and the empirical review, and understanding the way you are measuring your variables, understanding the measurement scales that you are using. If it requires ordinal scale, you need to know how to do that. It requires interval scale, ratio scale, all that. I remember they were they were discussed previously, but I know that is very key. The other one you need to know, when you have adapted items from previous scholars, it is even important to know the reliability and validity indices, such that you know when you are even discussing, you know, perhaps these measurement issues were not there. And that's why sometimes you need to go into the exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis, especially if you want to get your measurement models for your study variable. It's important to look at that. But on the other hand, whenever you run your model, again, you look at the errors in the final model, and let's not always celebrate whenever the errors are high in the final model. I think that's also another issue. Omitted variables and observed variables, at times when you ignore them, yes, you keep, I think research requires going back and forth. You need to keep checking and see whether perhaps there is no variable have ignored. At worst, if you are using the mixed methods, by the time you go to the qualitative, be able maybe to bring out that aspect such that perhaps the endogeneity issue could, excuse me, could have maybe could be handled using that other approach. And I think this explains, excuse me, this explains why sorry for that. I think this explains why at times when you have an issue in operationalization and measurement, you intend to look at that unstructured reality. If you anticipate that you have not done much conceptualization, then it helps so much. The other one is looking at the reverse causality. And this is what exactly we talked about lastly by looking at the practical example on how to use two-stage least square. Using two-stage least square, this is one of the common methods that in social science we use, and even those who come from pure science, natural science, they also look at this. What does it mean? When you use the two-stage least square, it means that you are going to introduce the instrumental variables. Now, when you are theorizing at times, you discover that there could be one of the variables which is very, very important in explaining the predictor variable. Whereas initially you are looking at the relationship between the predictors and the dependent variable, you discover that among the predictors, perhaps you have something that you have not considered, which would actually cause some of the predictors that you're having. It could be one or more than one of the variables, and those are what you call instrumental variables. So those potential variables that you think could lead to the predictor variables, lead to independent variables, then you have to consider them, and those are instrumental variables. Now, of course, if we are to go through this, we say that again, for those who enjoy figures, in most cases it's important to know mathematically how do you check that before you use the two-stage least squares. One, I mentioned about this earlier in one of the possible sources of the endogeneity. We say that when you look at the error term for your dependent variable, and you find that when you correlate it with the error term for the independent variable, and you find that the relationship is significant. If it is not equal to 0, it means that it's significant. That is when you now realize that that x1 has a hidden variable that perhaps would be able to handle this issue of the endogeneity. However, if you find that when you covary or you correlate the error term for the predictor variable and the error term for the dependent variable, then and you find it is not equal to 0, I mean it is equal to 0 this case, then it means that you are not worried. It means that you don't need to introduce the instrumental variable. Now, here I'm actually using one variable, but I know when you're conceptualizing, there are a number of predictors you may be having in the model. So you need to look at those different predictor variables, and you check whether the error term for the dependent variable could be significantly correlated with the error term of any of the predictor variables. So I think here I'm just using the simple regression, but I know in multiple regressions you have more than one independent variable. So you have to keep checking and see when you correct the error terms what happened. Of course, by the time we go to mediation testing, I know there are those softwares that require us to use the structural equational modeling. In structural modeling, in most cases, for the case of Amos, you can easily try to correlate those errors and you see the values. The only challenge is that for those who use smart PLS, since it is not, it doesn't usually suffer from measurement errors, because for it takes control of those errors. At times that one is not. You may not easily get to that, but for one really to go into this kind of testing, then you need to use another software, and you look at that. Maybe you can use SPSS if your sample is small. The only challenge again, how small is it? It should be above 30. I know for most of us, we hide into the use of smart PLS with the scholarly justifications. One, that we know that for it, it can take, it can consider the data which meets the parametric assumptions and non-parametric assumptions. That's its superior advantage. And so I think by the time we are using smart PLS, remember that. Now, when I talked about this, I remember I said that for the two list the two-list stage model. Now we said that two-stage least square model. We say that if you're using it, one, there are number of steps you consider. There are two methods actually in this. One, you may do it just by looking at the first stage. What do we mean by the first stage? The first stage, it's important to identify all those potential candidates which are instrumental variables, which you think can influence the predictor variable. Now, if you find that you have more than one predictor variables, which could have, again, either one or more than one instrumental variable, you do it stage by, should be done step by step. You check each predictor variable at a time. And when you now, assuming I have got, I've got X, which is the independent variable, and I suspect that because there's endogeneity between X and Y, and this endogeneity perhaps can be explained by more than one instrumental variables, those instrumental variables I now make them predictors of the endogenous variable, which now becomes your X. Now, when you now enter them in the software, computer software, then you will have to get a new variable. Especially, you have to save the predicted variables. And when you save that, those are the values that you enter in SPSS for stage 2, and then you regress them now with the response variable, which is the dependent variable. And for that case, when you have done that, then you are able now to look at whether the prediction is significant. Now, when it is significant, means that those instrumental variables are key. Those instrumental variables are key, and therefore you do not leave them out. But some people, if they want really to be conscious, they take those instrumental variables step by step, one by one, to be conscious that to know maybe this one could be very, very important. Could be very important. It's important to take one by one and you study the results deeply. Then later when you find that one is not maybe predicting significantly, then you can even take other more than one and see. So here, this is about interrogation. It's about interrogation, having got suspicion that you have that problem. I know, Chair, I'm sorry that I did not go by what I'm supposed to present today, but I was trying to make a recap of what we covered. So for today, I know we are supposed to look at mediation testing. I want to say this is very interesting. It is a very interesting topic. Why? At PhD, when you want to create a strong theory, you need to pay attention to the mediation and modulation. Mediation and modulation. I know I may not really cover this intensively given the time limit, because there is a serious debate going on mediation testing. And I want to, for today, to handle the mediation testing. What's the theory behind the mediation testing? Perhaps the chair, maybe next time, will give me some more time to go into another level now of analysis, which may not be today, because it requires intensive discussion. Now, I know the concept of mediation is not new. Whether you want it, you will find whenever you're making a decision, at times you need to have a mediator. You need to have a mediator. I know for those who come from legal, for those who understand the laws and other aspects, we keep on asking, do you have a mediator to resolve a number of issues? Sometime back, I don't know whether today we still also have go-between. When it comes to marriage as an institution, at times you need to have somebody who will create value in the relationship between the potential person perhaps you want to marry. In a business, you find somewhere again, you need to have somebody to negotiate for you. And so the concept of mediation is not new. It's not new. It exists from the social reality. Now, when it comes to statistics again, we see that this concept is very, very important. The only challenge we have is that how do we handle it? I know the assumption that we look at the effect. Effect means that though we usually use it in cross-sectional studies, where we remain at the associations in most cases, if you go into causation, experimental design, research design, looking at the longitudinal, those who do panel data, use panel data, those who use time series data, that would be very good, because ideally we look at the causal. However, I know given the contextual explanation that we try to provide in cross-sectional studies, we also try to use mediation testing. However, we must be very careful. With time, somebody can look at the assumption at which we use mediation from the causation point of view. So this is not new. In statistics, you also look at it. But in statistics, we need to know, where has this debate reached? Where has it come from? And where has it reached? Now, before we look at that debate now, where the debate is going, we now see, I have just used the just illustration here, that if you look at the grades here, grades being one of predictors, actually it's a predictor of happiness. When you look at this, it seems to be true, but at times not true. Most people are not always happy because they have got the best grades. We have seen people again who have better grades again not happy. Now it depends. If the grades can lead to self-esteem, the level of satisfaction, your satisfaction, perhaps that is when we shall say, okay, you can be happy. People get high grades, but sometimes they're never happy. Now, which means the self-esteem is that variable which can now explain the existence of the relationship between grades and happiness. So self-esteem can be a mediator. If it is to be a mediator, it must create value in acting as a conduit between grades and happiness. So I think it's important to know this. If the self-esteem does not create value in the relationship between the grades and happiness, then it is not a mediator. Now, mediators are also predictors like other independent variables that you have. The only difference that what role do they play in the relationship between the study variable that you're having. Now, I've added this other variable called age. When you look at age, it is just modulating. I know today is not to look at moderation, but it's important also to remember about it, because at a later stage, perhaps we shall also have a discussion on that. Age becomes a modulator. It modulates the relationship between the grades and self-esteem. Now, if I look at this model now, I can call it now modulated mediation. Now, I can even look at modulated one, mediation of self-esteem on relationship between grades and happiness, paying attention to the age being modulator. Because again, when it comes to self-esteem, it depends on somebody's age. There are people now who are never now, they want to have better grades, but their happiness may not depend on the grades they have got. So the age again may moderate. Although I also want to say that when you are choosing again what becomes a mediator and what becomes a modulator, I may explain it from the maybe management perspective. That in an environment, we usually have internal factors. We also have external factors. Now, whenever you're looking at whether this is going to be a mediator or moderator, remember the environment, remember the scope of your study. If your study is at organizational level, then the question comes, do you see those variables within that organization, or these variables are coming outside the organization? So most modulators come from external environment. Look at technology adoption. You're adopting something that you may not have control over in most cases. So I think there's again a debate on that. I don't want to make it conclusive, because the debate is still going on, you need to again pick interest in such kind of debates, because somebody can ask you, is this a moderator or mediator? Those questions come. The choice of what is going to be a mediator and moderator. So I think that's important. Now, when you look at A, I'm taking it as the coefficient, the beta coefficient, or the change in the self-esteem, which is brought by change in grades. That is A. And B, I'm taking it as the change in happiness, which is brought about by the change in self-esteem. Whereas C is the change in happiness that is brought by the change in the grades. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in this perspective, it means that A is your beta. Beta value, even B is beta value, even C is the beta value, but all of these relate to the path that you are taking. As we look at this now, where has this debate come from? Of course, before you look at where the debate has come from, this is another illustration of what the mediation is. I'm also looking at this, that when you look at this, the mediation again here, I'm taking spending levels to mediate the relationship between disposable income and level of satisfaction. Whereas these could be hypothetical, but from the reality point of view, you need to see the face validity of your model. The face validity of your model must come in. Now, do you see that we may have disposable income, but it's not automatic that you can be satisfied with your income? We have seen people with a lot of, they earn a lot and even leave a lot on their account, but they're never happy. So what makes them happy? Perhaps what makes them happy is the spending. You have got your money, you spend it on something that you think is valuable to you. That is perhaps when you'd say you are satisfied with that money. So it is important also to know that's not obvious. Now, if you look at this and there's no face validity, the face value, in other words, is not telling you that yes, spending levels cannot mediate. Leave out now the understanding of the theories and the empirical. But even when you look at it, do you see that yes, you need something in between to mediate? Yeah, yes, that's very important. So in marriage, I have also used that. I know it may not be in textbook, but in marriage, when you want to marry, at times you may need somebody in between. But is it a must that you must have somebody in between? If you are, I think that's important also to look at this. So if the spending levels cannot explain how and why the relationship exists between the disposable income and level of satisfaction, then it is not necessary to use it as a mediator. That is why your theory that you are using at PhD level must bring out the justification of why you need the spending level as your mediator, assuming your mediator is spending level. In other words, you must have a theoretical explanation of why you need a mediator. It's not a matter of saying this is going to be my mediator. No, you must have a theoretical explanation. And that theoretical explanation must be related in the way that the mediator will explain, will answer two questions: why and how the two relationship exists. Now, in this mode, of course, you can add as many predictors as possible depending on how you want to explain your dependent variable, depending on how on your conceptualization. Now, where has this debate come from and where has it reached? I know we have seen that mediation in law, it has been common from legal perspective. In our society, we see, in a business, we see mediation is done. But then when it comes to statistics, research and statistics, we have got a number of scholars that attempted to explain the mediation. One of the scholars, I think these scholars, we have Baron and Kenny. Baron and Kenny were the first, I think, according to my review, I know I don't want to give it as a categorical statement with a few reservations, but when you look at the scholarly view, you see that Baron and Kenny were the key people who were taking interest in understanding the mediation. Now, this the understanding actual mediation or testing mediation, they were actually using basically regression. They were able to regress. I think I'll explain it further. They're able to use regression and look at the beta values when they introduce the mediator, looking at whether the predictor can, the independent variable can maybe lead to the mediator, and whether the mediator can lead to the dependent variable. Now, the assumption, they were just looking at 4 assumptions. That's why I call it 4-step regression analysis. They just looked for steps. 1, to see whether you have the predictor, which predictor is your X, explaining the mediator. If the relationship is significant, then it means that that's okay. That's one condition which is satisfied. The second condition, looking at whether the mediator can also significantly predict the dependent variable. And the other one was also to look at whether the independent variable X can also significantly predict the dependent variable Y. And I think that was one of the key concern. Then plus the other one was now to push to control, to introduce this the mediator and the predictor variable and see what happens to the dependent variable, the change. That was their focus, and they would be able to tell whether mediation exists. Their challenge at that time was that they could not explain whether there is indirect and indirect and indirect contribution. They could not explain the contribution of the of that mediator in the model. That was a challenge. However, the debate again was picked by Zobair. Zobair again was able to now go ahead and pick from where Baron and Kenny stopped. The argument here was that, you see, you cannot tell whether, when the mediation exists, whether it is significant or not. And what kind of mediation do you have? Is it partial? Is it full mediation? Which the Baron and Kenny could not explain. And so they were able to come up with the path model. They were able to come up with a path model whereby they could be able to explain whether you have the direct or indirect mediation effect, and whether it is partial, whether it is full mediation. Now, their weakness again was that the assumption was that you have a normal, in other words, your data fulfills the assumptions of parametric. In other words, there is a distribution. The distribution exists. But we have seen that in most cases, it's not always obvious, because for them, they are interested in looking at the multiplication of the error terms. And when they find that the error term is not an issue, then for them they would make a conclusion, which was actually a limitation. Assumption parametric was not enough, because we see that currently we are using smart pairs that even when our data does not fulfill the parametric assumption, we can go ahead and we test for mediation using smart pairs. Now, that was a weakness, which again, the other scholars like Preacher and Hay, we are able actually to look at the bootstrapping, whereby they could be able to resample, they do the sampling until you are able to get a distribution, even when you know the data does not meet the parametric assumptions. So ideally, I may be using the language that a number of us are not, when I say parametric, simply means there's a distribution. And the distribution, there's one of the attributes we look at is a normal distribution. The other one is when you want to see whether data that we have from the sample is actually coming from the same kind of, from the population with equal variance. In other words, come from the source, same source, where those assumptions can also be tested, though not today. So, what does it mean? It means that this debate has been going on, and as I've said, we have said that Baron and Ken in 1986 was able to handle the issues of mediation. And I think when you look at the previous studies, whenever they are testing for mediation, they have concentrated on the use of Baron and Kenny. But I want to say today, as scholars, as the nascent scholars, if you are still believing in Baron and Kenny, you will have to attract a number of issues. And you know, their weakness particularly, they were only looking at the three variables. Today we are talking about more than three variables. Now, when you have more than three variables and you use Baron and Kenny, you use the bed test, you have an issue, because if you use these two approaches, it would mean that you are leaving out the simultaneous effect. And yet, when you look at the model you have developed, it is looking at more than three variables. So it's important to really pay attention to the choice of the method of mediation testing that we're going to use. Today, we now want to actually rely more on the methods that bring out the bootstrapping. Because the bootstrapping would, they bring out that when you keep on sampling until you get the distribution, then you are able to reach a certain point where you can be able to know whether you have even significant levels of prediction in the mediation model. So I think that's very, very important. That time, again, as you look at that, they were relying more, most those from social science, we are actually relying more on SPSS. SPSS is statistical package for social scientists. Now, today, this guy called Hay and Preacher, these guys have come up with a process marker So which, when you install it in spaces, you can actually do bootstrapping. Before that time, it was hard to do bootstrapping using spaces. Now, when it comes to smart PLS, partial least squares, then bootstrapping is there. It is there. You can be able to do that. Amos, you can do that. Those use R, programming software. Yes. Starter, it considers also it considers also those other assumptions that are fulfilled with bootstrapping, which means you can also use Starter. So it's important that now we know the current debate now. If you are still using Baron-Kenny as a Bell test, it means really you are not doing the best. You are doing injustice because perhaps you can only do that when you have three variables. But remember, each of these, when you look at the Zobel test, it has also its weakness. If your data does not meet parametric assumptions and you have three variables, ideally it means what you are doing is not right. I think it's important to pick that information. So this is what I've been saying, that from the beginning, when for Baron and Kenny, the interest was just keep regressing, and you see whether, for example, the regression between the grades and self-esteem would be significant. If it's significant, that's one condition that you consider. The other one, self-esteem, if it is a significant predictor of happiness, that's another. Then the other one, grades can significantly predict also happiness. When you have known that, those three major assumptions, then you would know that it's possible to proceed and you do mediation testing. But what happens, you go, of course, depending on if you want to use the bed test, then you go ahead and use the bed test. Now, of course, the first thing, if there's no direct relationship between grades and happiness, between the independent variable and the dependent variable without the mediator, if that relationship does not exist, you would not proceed. Today, it's not our debate. Today, the debate, you may find actually the grades are not directly leading to happiness. But what happens when the other ones are leading? So I think it's important to know this. That debate, we have left that now. So this is what I've been saying, that you have to consider these. If you are using Baron-Kenny, these are the assumptions you consider. These assumptions you consider. You look at step one, x with y, which is your x is the predictor variable and your y is the dependent variable. Step two is the predictor variable with the mediator, then the mediator and the predictor variable with y, and then you see what happens. So I'm using this. The C is a correlation, is a regression coefficient. C regression coefficient for x and y. That's the first thing you test. If that fails and you're using Baron-Kenny, then you don't proceed. And then for the other one, you have x with the mediator, where x is the independent variable and m is the mediator. Then you have to see whether a is significant. That beta value, is it significant? Is that relationship significant? Then you also look at mediator and the dependent variable and see whether it is significant. Is that beta value significant? Then you go to the C prime. The C prime means you look at now the relationship now, the regression between x and y, which is the independent variable and predictor variable, when you have introduced the mediator, and see whether it has created a change. By introducing this, and then when you introduce a mediator, the relationship has to reduce. For us to understand really from layman's kind of perspective, I want to say, if you are two people discussing, you have a strong discussion. Now, one of you could have generated that discussion. But as you are discussing, somebody comes. When he comes, what happens to the discussion? Do you find the way you have been discussing, does it continue with the same kind of magnitude, or it reduces? If it reduces, or if it increases, then it means that this person who has come has created, is now explaining why your discussion either was the way you are discussing either reduced, or you actually amplified your discussion. Mediator. I think from now onwards, I think for those who are meeting this concept for the first time, I can also bring it from religious perspective, although I have said some of these may not be in textbook. For us who are religious, there are those who believe that when you are talking to God, we need Jesus Christ to be a mediator. That perhaps if I talk to God and I get what I've got, and I've asked through Jesus Christ has created the reason why I'm able to get what I've got when I've talked to God. So you find that Jesus Christ is now the mediator. To some people, that's how they perceive it. But I don't want to go that way. Please, let's not generate debate on that perspective. I'm not the expert there. But for me, that's where I take it to mean that. But since we have different belief, I think you may also have another explanation. But for me, that's how I understand it, that I can talk to God through Jesus Christ as the mediator. I can also go directly. So there's a full mediation at one perspective when you are praying. There's also partial mediation at one perspective when you're praying. So there are those who talk to God directly. There are those who talk to God through Jesus Christ. So in other words, even in research, you need to know that perhaps as you look at the relationship between the two variables, you need to have a mediator which can explain the relationship, why the relationship is existing. So this is the debate of Zobel, which I said. However, the Zobel actually did the serious contribution, because even these other scholars picked interest from his work. As you see, what happens, his argument was that when you have the independent variable and you have identified the mediator, then you have the dependent variable. That yes, having looked at all those assumptions, the four assumptions, which Baron Likene came up with, which I mentioned. Now, he was able now to say, the weakness of Baron and Likene at first, they were not telling us whether you have a partial mediation or whether you have a full mediation. So what happened, again, they would not tell that whether that mediation has come because of the significance. You do not explain the significance. So what he did was able to introduce the concept of standard errors. That when you know the relationship between IV and mediator, you need now to look at the beta value. At the same time, you determine the standard error. Now, when you also look at the relation between mediator and dependent variable, then you'd be able to get the beta value and the standard error. Now, what did he do? He now said, in his understanding, he said that now when you get the product of A and the product of B, you get now the indirect effect. You now know the indirect effect of the mediator. So the indirect effect of mediator is now A times B. When you add A times B, where A is the beta coefficient between which has come which has come as a result of predicting the IV on the
I don't know. Have we lost our presenter? Like we lost. So, okay.
Sorry, I have been off, but I am back.
We lost you a bit. Maybe you start from where you stopped. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I was explaining that here, when you look at A is you regress the independent variable on a mediator. Now, when you regress the independent variable on a mediator, you get the beta coefficient. Beta coefficient is what called the marginal parameter. The marginal parameter means that you are looking at the value that the value which is the change in the mediator that is brought by the change in the independent variable. Then when you regress the mediator to the dependent variable, you get beta, B, which is B. This B is the coefficient, is a beta coefficient, which explains the change in the mediator that is brought by the change. So the change in the dependent variable that is brought by change in the mediator. In other words, that's what it means. Now, when you now multiply those beta coefficients, A times B, you get indirect what? Effect. Now, how did we know that indirect effect, which is brought by the mediator, is significant? For him, his view is that when you get standard error gain of this beta A multiplied by standard error of this beta B, now for this mediator to exist, now the product of the errors must be minimal. Minimal in a way that we must now look at the significant levels. Now, this one I may not change the statistics because ideally we have every question has got its language, but the language here we are saying that they are always cutoff points. They are cutoff points. Whenever we want to say there is a significance or not, we now look at the terms like confidence intervals and the precision levels. That it depends on whether you are using two-tailed or if it is two-tailed, for example, there are always two levels there are two levels of acceptance that you may consider for your significant values or for the values to be significant. One, you consider the values to be significant at 95 level of confidence, where you accept 5%, which is 0.01, or you may consider it at 99, where you have the position of 1%, and that is 0.01. Now, in this case, having now known the indirect effect, which is the product of A and B, and I've said A and B, you have known these are beta values in that perspective as you see here. Then you need to know the total effect. The total effect will now be the beta value you get when you now regress the grades or the independent variable with the dependent variable. Then you now look at, you add the product of the, the other coefficients, beta coefficients, which you have, which is the indirect effect. So you are now adding the direct effect plus the indirect effect. The direct effect is now the IV, the independent variable, regressed on the dependent variable or response variable. Now, that direct, which is beta value, when you now add it, you add it to the indirect effect, which is A times B. That's when you get the total effect. Now, as a scholar, again, this is very important. When you are now having three variables and your argument, again, you have found that all your data meets parametric assumptions, and then you find that you have three variables, they are not 4, they are not 5, and you find you are going to rely on this one, then you must be knowing the contribution of your mediator. That is very key. You need to compute it. How do you get it? You get indirect effect, you divide by the total effect, after that multiply by 100. Then you know what has it contributed. It has been explained the relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable, but it has explained what percentage, what percentage, and what are the scholars saying. If you was explaining 20%, do you think that is sufficient? Do you think that is enough? Actually, some scholars argue if you have 80, if it explains 80, that's really very good. You are ready to have talk about full mediation. But if it is now 50%, then you're talking about partial mediation. So ideally, when you now, I know these things, we are now talking about them theoretically, but when you now use a software and you generate values, you must be able to talk about the theory behind them. You must be able to justify why your results are that. Otherwise, you may be celebrating when actually the mediator does not contribute significantly in the relationship between your independent variable and the dependent variable. So, in other words, one says there is no mediation, when in actual sense you have the results. So it's important to really provide clear reason. Now, how do you get the Z value? As I said, this Z value, how computed, we just get, of course, the indirect effect. We divide by, of course, the square root of A squared. You know how to get A, and then times the standard error of A. Then you square it. You add the B, beta, which is B, in that relationship of self-esteem and happiness. Then you square it and multiply by the standard error of B, then squared, and then you get. So here I know I'm just trying to derive from first principles how how I was able to arrive at that. But when you're using the software, it will generate everything for you, and then you was just to make interpretation behind that. Just like when you look at this one here, what I'm illustrating, this is when you have entered the beta values that I've got using the what Baron Kenne gets using the regression model, those beta values, the sample size that you have used in the calculator, which in most cases is on the internet. You can just download it. It's called the MediGraph. You can download the MediGraph. MediGraph is always there on the internet, so you can get it and then you feed in the information and then you'll be able to generate the values. Just look at this. This is just illustration of what can come up. So when you have finished all of that and you now you generate just an output, which is in this form, which brings you there's a very value and a significant level. When you find a significant level, you can see this value is less than 5%, is being less than 1%. So you can see that it is significant. Now, at times, it even tells you the type of mediation that you have. The type of mediation that you have. But when you look at this now here, you realize that when introduced initially, if you look at the stress regressed on depression, initially we had 0.47, but when introduced the mediator, it reduced to 0.32. Now, what does it mean? It means that there is a partial mediation, even when the software has not given you. You can even see the indirect effect here to the total ratio is now giving you 0.325. 0.325, that shows that you have percentage of 32.5. 32.5, ideally, that's a partial. It is partially explaining 32.5 in the relationship between the stress and depression. So this is just an illustration, but this can be done practically once you have the regress. You have regressed using the first model which I used by Baron and Kenny. You can regress, and then using the calculator, MediGraph calculator, which is always online, you can download it. You can feed in information until you generate this output. And ideally, most of our studies, most of our research, if you look at most of the researches people have done, I think including me, one of the papers I published was about this. But today, I'm sure the debate has gone beyond. By then, we are looking at 3 variables, but currently, our conceptualization goes beyond 3 variables. And then 2, this approach of testing for mediation does not consider the spontaneous effects. That if I have another variable somewhere here, which is the 4th, I will not now know what the 4th variable brings in the same model unless you partial it out. And partialing out the variables to create 3 variables at the same time, you do it in that kind of step, you are now distorting your earlier conceptualization. So ideally, I want to say that this is a good model, but again, it has certain assumptions. When you're using the Bell test and Baron and Kenny, what happens is that you must remember that your data must be normally distributed. It must meet those parametric assumptions. Normal distribution, there is no multicollinearity. Multicollinearity means that the independent variables are not highly correlated. Then you must also have homogeneous variance, meaning that the data that you have has come from the same source. In other words, the sample has the variance that is equal to the population. So the parameter, when you look at the parameter and the statistic, if I use that language now, you find that they are close to each other. And in most cases, we are saying that if by the time you derive your model, you know it replicates the reality, it replicates the practice. On assumption that you have sampled, you have used the data from the sample, what you call inference, you want to infer using the model that you have derived about the whole population. And ideally, this is what we do in research, that we cannot study each, you can't look at all observations. What happens, we use statistical procedures in sampling and design, and we get our data, then we develop a model, and we use that model to now make a conclusion about the whole population. But before you do that, and you're having a mediation, remember that the data must now meet those parametric assumptions. And you make sure that there are no outliers, there are no missing values, because your data can't fit to be parametric data if those issues are. Now, this explains why now most of us would rely more when we, we rely more on other softwares like Smart Paris in most cases, because there are those issues that we don't find being satisfied by the data that we have. Now, so it is important to know that. The other one, which is also very important here, is the bootstrapping now. When the debate, of course, continued to advance, currently we are now talking about the bootstrapping as we test for mediation. Now, whether you are going to use Smart Paris, partial least squares, whether you're going to use startup, whether you're going to use other programming software, or whether you're going to use the SPSS, which has the process macro, whether you're going to use the EMOS, analysis of moment structures. Now, and you want to run a SEM. SEM is structure cohesion model. Structure model means that you are going to run the measurement models for your study variables, and then in your theorization and conceptualization, you knew how those global variables relate with each other. Then by the time you now look at those variables relating with each other, together with their measurement models, you come up with a robust model. And if you have one of the objective of mediation testing, ideally, by the time you look at that, you're supposed to use bootstrapping. Now, I want to say that whereas here, categorically I have indicated that bootstrapping was able to solve one of the weaknesses, which the other one was not able to see, of the parametric assumption. I want to say that again, it doesn't mean that when you're using bootstrapping, your data must not meet the parametric assumption. It meets parametric assumption, but on the other hand, with this current understanding of mediation, we are also saying that when you have non-parametric assumption, if your data meets non-parametric assumptions, you don't say you cannot test for mediation, because we have those smart pairs. We have smart pairs that considers small sample. As far as 12 observations, you can't imagine. It can also consider 12 observations, smart pairs. 12 to 30, you can even test for mediation. Now, I know again, for those who use EMOS for structural model, the assumption that your sample must be large enough, because it is so, it has issues, it is so suspicious when it comes to measurement errors. So you must be able to make sure that you increase the sample size to 200 and above, from 200 and above. Otherwise, when it is below 200, the fitting of the model, those fit indices, it will become a problem. It will become a problem. Even Ramuzea getting it, it becomes a problem. So ideally, this is what I can emphasize, that yes, today now, bootstrapping is better. And then it also considers the simultaneous effects that you have in a model. That if you have more than 3, then you can really do the analysis very well, comfortably, without having a fear that it is going to push out to 3 like the others that consider when you are only looking at 3 study variables. So this bootstrap method of mediation testing is currently taking a lead, because it has actually overcome the weaknesses of the previous scholars who tested mediation, the Brown and Kenny. So I know I have mentioned this, but there are other key scholars who are working closely with these people, who were actually able to validate these models that Baron Kenny, we together with Zobel, that usually came up with. I'm just citing few, but there are others. Now, Bootstrap, I know this what I've been emphasizing, that for Bootstrap, today we are not worried that we can do Bootstrap method of mediation testing using SPSS, when there's a process macro. Why? Because the Hayes and Preacher, they have proven that, and ideally, currently now, it's not something new. It can be done. So for those who are now conceptualizing and you have mediation testing, please remember some of these. Depending from where you're coming from, which software to use, I think it is a choice for those who come from statistics, because they are now and economics, they are fond of coding. They enjoy codes. So they like using Stata and the R programming. But for those who come from social science, in most cases, you don't want to go in those things of coding. So, and yet we are able to get the same answers. They are able to get the same results. So we tend to use Smart PLS and EMOS, then plus statistical package for social science using process macro. So idea, I think by now, we can make a choice depending on where we are coming from, how we are going to test for the mediation and which software to use. But ideally, I want to emphasize that if you have more than 3, please don't go and use the Baron and Kenne with Bear test. Ideally, you have issues. Now, what are some of the aspects that may guide you as you are looking at mediation testing? As you look at mediation testing, as a researcher, you need to pose a number of questions as you try to think about mediation testing. Pose a number of questions in your mind. These number of questions rotate on some of these few that I've mentioned. One, are you understanding the sample size? And then you have got a sample size. How are you going to derive your sample? Those questions must be in your mind. What is likely to be your sample size? Does your sample size, as you test for mediation, does it require you to use Smart PLS? Does it require you to use EMOS? Does it require to use SPSS? So I think those are some of the questions you pose. And then if now you are going to use the software that requires parametric assumptions to be fulfilled, how then are you going to select your sample? Are you going to use random sampling methods? Or you are going to use non-random sampling methods? Because those non-random sampling methods, they can be source of bias to the extent that you may fail to get the data meeting the parametric assumptions. You may fail to get the data having a distribution. So failing to have a distribution, a defined distribution. So that's very important. Then the other one that you have as you are testing mediation, you need also to remember, when you test for parametric assumptions, are they met? Are they fulfilled? Are they certified? Does the data certify the parametric assumption? If it doesn't, then what does it imply? Which software should I use to test for mediation? I think that's important. Then you may also look at the number of variables that you're having and how you are going to measure them. The number of variables that you are having and how to measure them. So if you have 3 variables, then you know which one you can use, provided there are those other assumptions that are being certified. Now, of course, this is why we say either 3 or more than 3. Which one to use? The sample size is above 200. What does it mean? EMOS automatically. You have below 200, you have a number of questions to justify. If you're using EMOS, ideally. Because somebody who developed this software has certain assumptions. So we believe that yes, you have really to understand and assumption under which the software is used. Otherwise, you may end up actually distorting the assumptions or the conditions that guide the analysis when you're using certain software. Below 30, it's below 30, yes, which one to use? So the choice I've been mentioning about this, we make a choice between a statistical package for social scientists, and we also consider smart pairs and Amos. Of course, this one we talked about it. I want for today to conclude with this, because we can't go to analysis. I had programmed or planned that today we look at the theory behind mediation, which I'm explaining. Now, when you, whenever you now test using the methods I've mentioned, you have to arrive at the results now. Now, when you have the results, you must be able to interpret them. Now, this is a guiding framework which one must be able to remember. Whenever you want to interpret your mediation results, remember this framework. There are two steps that you have to have in mind. The first one is to determine the significance of the indirect effect. Having known the indirect effect that exists, when indirect effect exists, it means mediation. If you look at indirect effect existing, you need now to know whether that indirect effect is significant or not significant. That must be in your mind. And we have seen direct effect is A times B. Now, whether you are using, this is very interesting, whether you're using the bootstrapping, the way you determine direct effect is the same way with when you are using the Berry test. Because this guy is built on the knowledge of Baron and Kenne with the Berry test. The only differences, I've explained a number of them. Now, if you find the indirect effect significant, you don't stop there. If you find it is indirect effect is not significant, you also don't stop there. You now need to go further and now determine the type of effect. What is the type of effect of mediation that you have? Now, when you assess the significance of the direct effect, what happens? Now, the significance of direct effect now, because at first you have checked whether the indirect effect exists, is significant, it is significant. If it is significant, then you look at direct effect now. What is happening? If the direct effect is not significant, what does it mean? It means that you have a full mediation. That mediator which you have introduced is the only one through which the independent variable can explain your dependent variable. That in this case, if I find there's a full mediation, self-esteem has a full mediation, it means that this is a variable which is a mediator that only explains the relationship between the grades and happiness. And therefore, for grades to have influence on happiness, it must go through self-esteem. So self-esteem is a conduit through which the grades can influence happiness. I'm now using those words because I'm assuming that we are looking at causation, not association. So it enhances, it's the only one which enhances. In other words, for grades cannot go through directly, cannot influence directly happiness. It is only through self-esteem that we can have happiness. Only through self-esteem that we can have happiness. Now, the other one is when the direct effect is significant, that one, when it is significant, it means there's a partial mediation. Partial mediation means, like here, if there's a partial mediation, it means that part of the effect whereby the self-esteem enables grades to influence happiness. It means that this plays a part, it has a partial role. It has a partial role in explaining the relationship between grades and happiness. Partial role means that part of the relationship is explained by the presence of self-esteem, and another one can be the level of happiness can actually be directly explained by the grades. That yes, it is true, some people are happy when they have good grades. But again, we're also saying that self-esteem partly explains why some grades can actually influence happiness. So it is important. Now, this again reminds us to go back to the theory. Whenever you have results, go back to the theory. What did you say? What does the theory say? What does the theory explain? Are you again in line of the theory? Or if there's a new finding that you are finding, you now need to know the implication, the theoretical implication of that. The other one is that you may find again on this other right-hand side, we are saying the indirect effect is not significant. And if it is not significant, do you stop there? No. We now also assess the direct effects. Now, if the direct effect is significant, if it is significant, when you check the direct effect and you find it significant, but indirect effect was significant. In other words, that you found that when you multiplied A times B and look at the significant level, it was not significant, meaning that self-esteem is not mediating. But we can't say it's not mediating as per se, but there's a language we use. We say it's direct only. Direct only means that there's no mediation. There's no mediation. There's no mediation. And in that case, if there's no mediation because the other one was not significant, ideally we know if in the theorization you said it is significant, I mean the mediation brings is significant in explaining the relationship, then you don't stop there, because ideally I know most people, whenever they find results which are not significant, they celebrate after it has not significantly mediated. And yet from the earlier your theorization, you said that this has a strong explanation of why and how this grades improves happiness. Then you sit and relax. I think that's not good for a scholar. You must provide a strong explanation. Otherwise, one may now think your theorization was wrong. So you need to provide a stronger justification why the mediation does not exist, and yet earlier you had emphasized it exists. The other one is when direct effect is not significant, and remember also indirect effect was not significant. So what does it mean? It means there's no effect, there's no mediation. So ideally that's what it means. Chair, I hope I've not rushed, but for today I wanted us to go through the theory. Perhaps when time allows again on another day, we shall now go into the practical. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gideon. I think members, let us join together and appreciate Dr. Gideon for such a wonderful presentation. And I think last time, most of the comments were around there. Inadequate understanding of the theory of the statistics most times end up Even if you have got someone to analyze for you, you just present things and then you begin interpreting them the other way around, or you don't appropriately support the process of discussing your findings. So I think at this juncture, because I see time is running, again, maybe let me acknowledge the senior colleagues in the platform as I know their questions. I know their questions, their comments from senior. As we are formulating their questions, allow me to take this opportunity to acknowledge most of the senior colleagues who logged in this morning. Of course, the platform attracts people from different countries within Africa, even Europe, Asia. And allow me to appreciate Professor Joseph Ntai, Professor James, Professor Picho, Dr. Hamad, Dr. Isaac Newton Kayongo, Dr. Hassan Bashir, Dr. Goreti Shenem, and Dr. Ibrahim Senze. I don't know whether I've forgotten any other senior colleagues, but if you have any question, comment, you can raise up your hand and then we give you a chance. But honestly, Dr. Gideon, this is a job well done. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Thank you so much. Any comment? Yes. Bernard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Nkurunziza, for walking us through that. Dr. Okoche, Professor Okoche, just have a minor addition, especially to those who are using Stata for this kind of analysis. So I'm not bringing anything new. I am just sharing with those who are Stata users. How do you go about what Dr. Nkurunziza has just mentioned? So the most important thing, if you have Stata, what I wanted to show is it doesn't come with this package or with this language or command. So just type this in your command window and press enter and then allow it to install. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes and then you are good to go. In other words, you can't go ahead and do mediation if your Stata does not have this package. And to briefly what he has been talking about. So step number 1, there are 2 strategies in Stata to do this, but the difference he has also explained here between 1 and 2. Step number 1 is the Baron and Kenny he was referring to. It doesn't tell you whether it is full or partial, whatever you are doing. So we start from the first step, like he has explained. And then to enter this is the command now. Enter this, your independent variable, your mediating variable, your dependent variable. MC reps, these are Monte Carlo replications, and it's just telling you that because of the sampling approach that it runs, 500 is not the standard. I mean, it can be 100 or whatever, but these are large sample analysis. That's why they just put that 500. RIT is the ratio of indirect to total effect, indirect effect to total effect. So it will compute for you this ratio, this number between 0 and 1. RID is the ratio of indirect to direct. So if we want to see the proportion of your mediation between direct and the direct one. So ZLC, which is ZAO, is just the same step as that, but we added this. The reason is for the bootstrap that he was explaining, or for the resampling for the indirect effects. So again, you start from the Baron and Kenny step, which is the default state, which doesn't tell us whether it is direct, full or not, or partial. And then the second step is again this, but we add this. So the result will have 2 columns for the first one, the second one, and do the difference. But that will be for the other case. So for starter users, we are saying no caps latent. This is just the emphasis that whether you have latent variables or not in terms of your estimations, just an emphasis, but it's not that important. All right. Thank you, Professor Kwesi, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Julius. Julius, you have a comment? I see our time is coming almost. Yes, the word is Julius.
First, I want to thank Professor Koche. My name is Ewaju Julius. I also want to thank the presenter, Dr. Gideon, for being so much elaborate. I also have my professor in attendance, Professor Picho Epiphany. I want to thank him for being in attendance. I wanted to bring out the following question. I have really understood. My first question I wanted to ask is whether at certain times the dependent variable, whether the dependent variable can sometimes also be a predictor, because I think I have understood that it is the independent which is the predictor, while the dependent is the response. Is there a possibility that sometimes it can happen the other way around? And if it has happened the other way around, I think I understood we are saying that with the mediation theory, it can try to be able to balance the impact of both when it comes now to validity and reliability. The other thing is what I wanted to find out is most independent and dependent variables have relationships. Normally there's a relationship, even before you go for the research, there is a relationship. And it is some of these relationships that cause causality. So I wanted to say that, does this relationship of causality affect the reliability of the results, or does it bring more bias? Then the other one that I wanted to talk about is how do we control? Is it possible to say that the instrumental variables could be the extraneous variables? How can we control these instrumental variables when we are conducting research? Maybe let me stop there and leave for other brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.
Okay.
But of all things, it's very important lecture.
Thank you so much, Julius, for that question. I think let me invite Professor Joseph to make some comments, but also there are materials on the chat room. You can upload them. And maybe also, yes, this Professor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, Dr. Nkurunziza, for walking us through this very important area that we ignore quite often. Maybe I should begin by letting you know that I've given you some books so that maybe next time when we meet, some of the questions you are asking may have reduced a bit. Please read that book, Introduction to Mediation, Moderation, and Conditional Process Analysis, a regression-based approach from Andrew Hayes. That is very, very good for you. And if you're just starting to pick interest in that area of mediation moderation, and maybe some of the questions that Julius has just asked are actually answered in that book. I've given you more than one. I'll not talk about the rest, but I wanted to emphasize that one because it has most of the things that we're talking about. Now, one of the things that you need to bear in mind as you take this process of either mediation or moderation, whatever it is that you are guided by the theorization, right? You are guided by the theories that you are using, and of course the conceptualization. If your conceptual model has relationships that are similar to what Gideon has displayed there, then you need to test for those things. And that's why you must be very careful. If, for example, you don't have such kinds of relationships, if you are treating all of them as independent variables, then maybe you need to be very careful not to draw the diagram, because the moment you draw the diagram, they will start asking you for the other mediators and the tests and the additional objectives and hypotheses that you may not have really thought about. So you'll be better off having those models, statistical models, and you move with them, because most likely you have x1, x2, x3, or up to xn, assuming that we have so many other variables explaining probably why, right? And that's what you should probably have. Now, the other thing that most people are usually silent about, especially for those who do not have statistical minds and mathematical minds, is that they tend to draw diagrams like the one that you've seen Gideon displaying, but they never provide mathematical formulas or statistical formulas. In other words, when they draw such a diagram and later on they come up with the statistical outputs, when the SPSS or starter gives you the outputs, it becomes a little bit hard for you to start interpreting, because you can't relate the diagram and the outputs that you got from the starter or from the software. So it's always advisable that even after you have drawn that diagram, you must actually come up with those formulations, the model formulations. You must give us the models, statistical or mathematical or a combination of both, so that we can actually see the relationship between what you have there and the other one. And that will tell us whether you have mediators again and moderators, and that's quite important. Now, the other point that I need to make here is the fact that in mediation, you've got levels. You have the first level, for example, what Gideon has been talking about and what Bernard also brought out, that you can have that addition in a starter, right? You may have seen that it had symbols like X, M, and Y. In other words, the assumption here is that you have one mediator, right? So in other words, your X, right, has to go through a mediator called M for you to go to Y. That is the criterion variable or the dependent variable. Now, some of the relationships we have are more complex than that. So you have a 1 level, you have a 2-level mediation, a 3-level mediation, and so forth. You can even have a 5-level mediation. And unless you have a series of equations, not one equation, not 2 equations, now or 3, right? But unless you have a series of equations, there is no way you can actually solve that problem. You are, what they're talking about, Baron and Kenny, right? You bring in the other you bring the other fellows who test for the significance, right? Like Aronian, you can use the Aronian, then you can use the one that Gideon has just given us. All of those ones become now irrelevant, because then there's no way you're going to solve a 5-level mediation or 3-level mediation using that. So in the only solution you have there is to use a high-level software that brings out those things. And that's why you have SEM, structural equation modeling. Now, when you talk about same structural equation modeling, they're talking about a series of equations that must be solved simultaneously at the same time, so that the value you get for M1, for example, and M2 and M3 will satisfy all those equations at once. And probably, again, for some of us who have forgotten simultaneous equations, we can go back to our secondary level education, where you begin with a few unknowns, and then you advance to so many unknowns. Maybe you discover that now substitution cannot work and you must use matrices. And most of these software packages actually use matrices. So we move to a higher level analysis in that case. So you have a second level, third level, and fourth level. And I think that is quite important for us to understand. Now, let me possibly, as I close, because again, I do not want to dilute the presentation that has been made, maybe relating to Julius, right? Julius's question. Yes, Julius, it is true, right? Your dependent variable, or called Y in this case, when you say X goes through M and predicts Y, the relationship can be reversed, right? And that's why we have been, that's why Gideon has been laboring, trying to talk about endogeneity bias, right? So it is true in some situations, you know, instead of saying that X leads to Y, as being as simple as we are in our understanding and conceptualization, in some situations, Y may actually lead to X, right? That's why you must try to test for that kind of endogeneity, right? So it is possible. Then the other one, yes, the moment you have more than one variable, Julius, in the model, for example, you have X1, X2, X3, X4. It is true. You know, when you enter one variable in your model, whether that's simple regression that you're using, you will get a value, right? That is true. Now, when you enter the second variable into the model, I can assure you there is always an interactive effect, right? An interactive effect. Now, if you want to find out whether what I'm saying is correct, try it in the area of natural sciences. Just bring one chemical, right? And apply it on your substance, Y. And then later on, introduce a second chemical. You'll find that the interaction between the chemical A and the chemical B will actually have another effect on Y, right? So the interactions are there, and actually scholarly works advises us to look at this kind of interaction. So wherever you have moderation, so wherever you have this mediation, or wherever you have any regression, remember moderation may also be present. So those are some of the things that we have to test and think about before running a regression and getting excited about the results, and we just rush. But again, this will depend on the objectives and hypotheses that you craft. Otherwise, if you are not guided by the objectives and hypotheses, you're going to look at so many things and you will never finish your PhD. But just be aware that these things do exist. Chair, let me stop there.
Thank you so much, our mentor, for the insights. And I also want to appreciate Bernard for additions. But I think from what you can see, and even what Gideon said, I think we shall need to have another session, and I think it will help us to. But I think for this day, we have really tried as much as possible, and I really must thank Gideon and all the people who have spoken for having occupied us this morning and really brought critical insights. And I think the books are there. We can keep reading the books, and also the insights are really quite critical. And I will also maybe request Gideon that you could share with people the presentation, and then in the various chat rooms, and you can see how people can keep on, so that next time when we are moving ahead, we shall be able to grow. So I see that we're almost come to the end of our session, and I want to invite one of our senior colleagues to close with a few words and then prayer. And let me invite Dr. Goretti Chione. You just make a few remarks and then close with a word of prayer. But I must say that this is a morning well spent. Yes, Dr. Goretti. Dr. Goretti, yes.
Thank you, Professor Michael. And I would like also to thank our mentor, Professor Antai, and all those that have participated this morning. I would like to greatly appreciate Gideon for the good presentation. Very, very insightful in terms of revision and learning. Thank you, Gideon. Allow me to also thank this PhD students online. I think learning has taken place. And also, more critically, the takeaway I should say is that to move with what is happening now, that we don't have to be held in the old methods of analysis for mediation. I know that a number of articles that we see still depend on Baron and Kenny and Sobel test. But Gideon has brought it out very clearly that so long as you have more than 3 variables, then you must move with the relevant approach in analyzing your mediation. So let us look out for the practical part of it, which will come next week. And I hope that we shall all be there. On that note, let us humble ourselves to pray. Father Lord, we thank you for this morning, for the knowledge shared. We pray that you grant us more wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to apply all that we have exchanged, and also to give us good health to meet again next week. In your name, I have prayed. Amen.
Thank you. Nice Sunday. Bye.
Dr. Walugembe, we have not heard you today.